Harry Potter and the Journey of Individuation. The hidden psychology of Harry Potter. Picture this: an 11-year-old boy, living in a cupboard under the stairs, suddenly discovers he's a wizard. But what if I told you that Harry Potter's journey isn't just about magic and adventure? It's actually one of the most profound psychological transformations ever written. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who gave us concepts like the collective unconscious and the shadow self, described a process he called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming your authentic self by integrating all aspects of your personality, including the parts you'd rather hide. And Harry Potter's 7-year journey from the cupboard under the stairs to defeating Voldemort is perhaps the most perfect illustration of this process ever put to paper. Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Like there was a part of you that you kept hidden, even from yourself? Jung believed that we all carry within us both light and shadow, and that true psychological wholeness comes only when we learn to integrate these opposing forces. Today, we are going to dive deep into how J.K. Rowling, whether intentionally or not, created a masterpiece of Jungian psychology. We'll explore how Harry's Horcrux represents the shadow work we all must do, why his complex relationship with Severus Snape reveals the nuanced nature of the human psyche, and how the Deathly Hallows symbolize the final stages of becoming whole. Understanding Jung's individuation process. Before we dive into Harry's journey, let's understand what Jung meant by individuation. Jung believed that we are all born with a complete psyche, but as we grow up, we learn to suppress certain aspects of ourselves to fit in with society, our families, and our own idealized self-image. The parts we suppress don't disappear, they form what Jung called the shadow. Individuation is the process of reclaiming these lost parts of ourselves and integrating them into our conscious personality. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Think about your own life for a moment. What parts of yourself have you learned to hide? What aspects of your personality did you push away because they weren't acceptable to others? Jung would say these rejected parts are still there, influencing your behavior from the unconscious. The individuation process typically involves several stages. First, we encounter our persona, the mask we wear for the world. Then we must confront our shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected. Next, we integrate our anima or animus, the contrasexual aspects of our psyche. Finally, we work toward integration with the self, the totalized, authentic version of who we really are. Now, let's see how Harry's journey maps perfectly onto this psychological transformation. Harry's shadow, the Horcrux within. From the moment we learn that Harry carries a piece of Voldemort's soul within him, we are witnessing one of the most powerful metaphors for shadow work ever created. The Horcrux isn't just a magical plot device, it's a perfect representation of how we all carry within us the very qualities we despise in others. Jung observed that what we hate most in others is often a reflection of what we can't accept in ourselves. He called this projection. We project our own shadow qualities onto others and then react strongly against them. Harry's ability to see into Voldemort's mind, to feel his emotions, and even to speak Parseltongue represents how our shadow aspects are always connected to our conscious self, whether we acknowledge them or not. Remember how Harry struggled with anger throughout the series. His rage at Umbridge, his fury at Snape, his moments of wanting to use unforgivable curses. These weren't just teenage emotions. They were manifestations of the shadow work he needed to do. The Horcrux amplified these feelings because it represented the parts of Harry that he hadn't yet integrated. Jung believed that we can't simply get rid of our shadow, we must integrate it. And that's exactly what happens when Harry willingly walks into the Forbidden Forest to face Voldemort. He doesn't fight the shadow, he accepts it as part of himself, which is the only way it can be transformed. Have you ever noticed how the people who trigger you most often reflect qualities you haven't accepted in yourself? What if, instead of fighting these aspects of yourself, you could learn to integrate them consciously, the way Harry integrated his connection to Voldemort? The collective unconscious, Hogwarts as Psyche. Jung believed that beneath our personal unconscious lies the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of psyche shared by all humanity, populated by universal symbols and patterns he called archetypes. Hogwarts itself represents this collective unconscious, a place where ancient wisdom, magical creatures, and archetypal figures come together. Each of the 4 houses represents different aspects of the psyche that must be integrated. Gryffindor embodies courage and moral conviction, the heroic aspect of the self. Ravenclaw represents wisdom and intellectual pursuit. Hufflepuff symbolizes loyalty, hard work, and connection to others. And Slytherin, often vilified, represents ambition, cunning, and the shadow aspects we need to acknowledge. The fact that Harry almost gets sorted into Slytherin isn't a coincidence. It's recognition that he carries within him all aspects of the psyche, including the ones he'd rather deny. The Sorting Hat sees the totality of who Harry is, not just the persona he wants to present. Throughout his time at Hogwarts, Harry must learn to work with people from all houses. His friendship with Luna Lovegood teaches him to embrace the wisdom of Ravenclaw. His respect for Cedric Diggory shows him the value of Hufflepuff loyalty. And his complex relationship with Draco Malfoy forces him to confront the Slytherin aspects of his own nature. Jung said that the goal of individuation is not to eliminate the shadow but to develop a conscious relationship with it. Harry's journey shows us that we can't simply reject the parts of ourselves we don't like. We must find ways to integrate them constructively. Integration of opposites. Light and dark magic. One of Jung's central insights was that psychological health comes from integrating opposites, not from choosing one side over another. In the wizarding world, this principle plays out through the relationship between light and dark magic, and Harry's unique position of being able to access both. Harry's ability to produce a powerful Patronus, one of the most advanced forms of light magic, develops alongside his growing understanding of dark magic. He learns unforgivable curses not because he's evil, but because understanding all aspects of magic makes him more complete as a wizard. This mirrors how Jung believed we must understand our capacity for both good and evil to become psychologically whole. The relationship between Harry and Voldemort represents what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological process that bridges the gap between conscious and unconscious, between light and shadow. Neither Harry nor Voldemort can exist while the other survives, but this isn't because they're simply opposites. It's because they represent split aspects of the same psyche that must eventually be integrated. Voldemort's fatal flaw was his inability to understand love, which Jung would recognize as a failure to integrate his anima, the feminine, relational aspect of the psyche. By splitting his soul into Horcruxes, Voldemort literally fragmented his psyche, making integration impossible. Harry's journey moves in the opposite direction, toward integration and wholeness. When Harry uses the killing curse to finally defeat Voldemort, he's not becoming evil. He's integrating his shadow in service of a higher good. Jung called this the development of the self, the archetype of wholeness that transcends the ego's limited perspective. The death of the ego, Platform 9 3/4 and Rebirth. The entire Harry Potter series is structured around symbolic deaths and rebirths, which Jung recognized as essential to the individuation process. The ego, our conscious sense of self, must die repeatedly as we grow into our authentic nature. Harry's first symbolic death occurs at Platform 9 3/4, where he must walk through what appears to be a solid wall. This represents the leap of faith required to move from the mundane world of the ego into the magical realm of the unconscious. Every time Harry passes through this barrier, he's symbolically dying to his old self and being reborn into a new level of awareness. The Chamber of Secrets represents a descent into the underworld of the psyche, where Harry must confront the basilisk, a serpent that kills with its gaze. In mythological terms, the serpent often represents wisdom and transformation, but it can also symbolize the destructive power of the unconscious when it's not properly integrated. Harry's encounter with the Dementors introduces him to what Jung called the dark night of the soul, the psychological crisis that often precedes major growth. The Dementors suck out happiness and leave their victims with only their worst memories, forcing Harry to confront his deepest traumas. His Patronus, a stag like his father's, represents the integrated masculine energy that emerges from this confrontation with despair. But the most powerful death and rebirth occurs in the Forbidden Forest, where Harry willingly accepts what he believes will be his death. This represents what Jung called the sacrifice of the ego, the moment when we stop trying to control our lives and surrender to a deeper wisdom. Harry's temporary death and resurrection symbolize the death of the ego-driven self and the birth of the integrated self. Have you ever experienced a moment when you had to let go of who you thought you were to become who you really are? That's the kind of psychological death and rebirth that Jung believed was necessary for true growth. Becoming whole, the master of death. The Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak represent the final stage of Harry's individuation process. Jung believed that the ultimate goal of psychological development was not immortality or power, but wisdom and integration. Harry's relationship with each hallow reveals his growing psychological maturity. The Elder Wand represents the ego's desire for power and control. The Resurrection Stone symbolizes our inability to let go of the past and accept loss. The Invisibility Cloak, which Harry inherited from his father, represents authentic inheritance, not just material objects, but psychological patterns and wisdom passed down through generations. The crucial moment comes when Harry chooses to drop the Resurrection Stone rather than use it to bring back his loved ones permanently. This represents the psychological maturity to accept loss and death as natural parts of life. Jung believed that accepting mortality was essential to living authentically, what he called living in the face of death. By the end of the series, Harry has become what the tale calls the master of death, not because he can avoid death, but because he no longer fears it. He's integrated his shadow, accepted his losses, and learned to choose love over power. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not perfection, but wholeness. The epilogue, set 19 years later, shows us Harry as a fully integrated adult. He's named his children after the people who helped him on his journey, Albus Severus, honoring both Dumbledore and Snape, representing his ability to hold complexity and paradox without needing to resolve everything into simple categories. Your own journey of individuation. Harry Potter's journey from the cupboard under the stairs to King's Cross Station is ultimately a roadmap for your own psychological development. Jung believed that every human being has the potential for individuation, for becoming whole, but it requires courage, honesty, and willingness to face the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. Like Harry, you carry within you both light and shadow. You have aspects of yourself that you've learned to suppress, dreams you've abandoned, and parts of your authentic nature that you've hidden away. The journey of individuation is about reclaiming these lost parts of yourself and integrating them into a coherent, authentic whole. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The next time someone triggers a strong reaction in you, ask yourself, what aspect of my own shadow am I seeing reflected back at me? How can I integrate this quality constructively rather than simply rejecting it? The beauty of Harry's story is that it shows us individuation isn't a destination. It's a lifelong process. Even at the end of the series, Harry is still growing, still learning, still becoming more of who he truly is. And that's the real magic. Not the ability to cast spells, but the courage to become authentic in a world that often rewards conformity. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be perfect and started working toward being whole? What parts of yourself have you been keeping locked away in a cupboard under the stairs? And what would happen if you finally gave yourself permission to step through your own platform 9 3/4 and begin the adventure of becoming who you really are? Your journey of individuation is waiting. The only question is, are you ready to begin? If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with shadow work and personal growth in the comments below. And if you're ready to dive deeper into Jung's psychology and how it applies to your own life, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because understanding yourself is the most important magic you'll ever learn. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to become whole. And that journey, like Harry's, begins with a single step into the unknown.